Hello everyone and welcome to all of the Easter eggs from the wonderful episode 73 Yards of Doctor Who. I am of course Ellie Littlechild and I've been through some changes. Okay, as it's pretty obvious, no, I am not Ellie. Ellie is in fact slightly more than 73 yards away from me right now. She is, if I were to take a guess, something like 8,377,600 yards away. Basically, she's in one country, I'm in another. It's the magic of cinema. So, shall we get straight in with number 24, the fact that there is no opening titles for this episode of Doctor Who. That is a really, really rare thing. It happened before with the episode Sleep No More, and then it happened as well with The Woman Who Fell to Earth and Resolution, although I will say Sleep No More did at least feature the words Doctor Who on screen. Going straight into number 23 then, and we get that pretty out there outfit that the Doctor is wearing when he steps outside the TARDIS. Basically, he woke up one morning and went, do you know who I miss? I miss Nardole. I'm gonna dress like Nardole today. Or, what he might have been thinking is that, well, I did name drop Sarah Jane recently, so maybe I'll dress like her, like she did in the Sontaran experiment. Going into number 22 now, when the Doctor is enthusiastically describing the Welsh landscape, as well one should, he speaks these coming lines. The rocks and the water, it never ends. The war between the land and the sea. Now I read that out because I have the memory of a goldfish, but actually, aquatic theme works here because the war between the land and the sea is a long rumored title for a potential Sea Devils centered spin-off. Now that's been mentioned as recently as this year on productionlist.com, which is a website that tracks new and upcoming productions. So, is this a clever name drop for an upcoming spin-off from the beloved episode, Legend of the Sea Devils, or is this all a massive red herring? Number 21 sees Ruby talking about the time she'd been to Wales previously, including going to see Shy Girl in Cardiff. Shy Girl is a real-life dance musician known for experimental style. This also isn't Shy Girl's only link to Doctor Who, kinda. The cover art for her 2020 EP Alias seems to draw rather a lot of inspiration from a certain Lady Cassandra. I mean, I don't see it myself. Number 20 sees the beginning of the darkness of this episode when the Doctor is telling Ruby about Roger ap Gwilliam and his disastrous turn as Prime Minister in the year 2046. Now, 2046 had previously been an important year in the episode The Waters of Mars. In The Waters of Mars, the Bowie Base 1 biography for crew member Steffi says that she obtained her doctorate in solid-state physics in 2046. Number 19, of course, we would be terrified not to include because I really think Ellie would come after me with a knife, and that's when the Doctor stops telling Ruby the story of Roger ap Gwilliam and says, oh, spoilers. Now what on earth could that be a reference to?
Spoilers!
Number 18, and we reckon this one is a bit of a link back to Wild Blue Yonder, and that's the Doctor stepping into and breaking the fairy circle on the cliff top in Wales. It's very reminiscent, the power that comes out of it with the Doctor disappearing, of the Doctor invoking salt at the edge of the universe. Now, if that seems like a tiny little bit of a stretch, think about it. It's this use and connection to the supernatural within Doctor Who that has a direct, immediate response. As we will see later in the episode, even others are beginning to realize that, yes, we're seeing more and more supernatural in the show, and there's no way this is just a coincidence. Number 17 then deals directly on from the fallout of this, which is the Doctor disappearing, and this becomes our first Doctor Light episode of Russell T Davies's new era. Ruby then manages the entire rest of the episode effectively on her own. She deals with everything that happens around her. We have seen this in previous Russell T Davies projects before. First of all, take Turn Left, which is probably the obvious example. This is when the Doctor and Donna are separated and an entire new universe builds up around Donna. Thanks very much, Trickster, you dick. The story then of Roger ap Gwilliam as the episode goes on seems very reminiscent of Russell T Davies's 2019 series Years and Years, particularly that nihilistic sense of what's to come and how we may survive it. It's been mentioned, of course, in the ups and downs previously that there's a lot of comparisons between this episode and Years and Years. If you haven't watched it, I really recommend it. It's a very, very powerful series. Number 16 then is building on from this theme of inspirations for this episode, and particularly the works of Alan Garner. Garner is an English novelist known for his fantasy tales, but he's also dabbled in Welsh folklore as well, such as his 1967 book The Owl Service, which deals with the myth of Blodeuwyd. She is a woman who was turned into an owl by the magician Gwydion. Russell was also inspired by the Mabinogion, which are old Welsh folktales he learned about while in school. Number 15 sees Ruby's stalker, if you like, making some very interesting hand gestures. I say interesting because we were sitting there in the episode going, what do they mean? And quite frankly, it's not all that satisfying. Allow me to read out what we discovered in Doctor Who Unleashed. Bless you, thank you so much. That's so kind of you. When you gave me the little thing, it was just so precious. How am I ever going to repay you? But we'll think of something. Yeah, that seems like something terrifying that people would run away from in fear and never look at Ruby again, right? Obviously, these gestures were chosen just to have something that we could see from a distance. 14 sees Ruby bumping into a hiker who's played by Susan Twist, and we are up again with Twist Watch. Susan Twist has, to date, played 6 different characters in the last 8 episodes. She played Mrs. Merridew in Wild Blue Yonder, she was the woman in a pub in the church on Ruby Road, she was serving tea in the Devil's Cord, she was one of the comms officers on Space Babies, she was the ambulance interface in Boom, and here she is as the hiker. Now this is the first time that the Doctor or Ruby have properly come face to face with one of Susan Twist's characters, and there's even a moment of recognition when Ruby reckons that she might have met her before. Obviously this is going to develop and build, so I would not be shocked if we see either the Doctor or Ruby or both interacting with her in Dot and Bubble. Who do you think she is? Because we have all of our theories. Let us know in the comments below. Number 13, and after chatting to Susan Twist, she comes across the pub of a Prenmaro, which was established in 1863. A Prenmaro also translates into the Dead Wood, which ties very nicely into the supernatural horror elements of this episode. While 1863 itself doesn't have a massive significance in Doctor Who history, it is notable to say that it's 100 years before 1963, which is of course when the show properly started. Number 12, and speaking of horror, if you got some Torchwood vibes when Ruby walked into the pub, there's a very good reason for that. Firstly, the landlady of the pub is played by Maxine Evans, who played Helen Sherwood in the Torchwood episode Countryside. You know, the one about cannibals. Even better, if that's the word we want to go with here, is that the pub itself appeared in the episode Countryside. In real life, it's the White Cross in Groswen in Wales. It featured in Countryside as the Tap House. That's where Jack, Gwen and Owen barricade themselves indoors to save themselves from the aforementioned cannibals. Number 11, and this is when we do our kind of going through each of the frames that we can, and we settle on one of the taps, which is serving a drink called Llanfyrceiriog. Llanfyrceiriog was a village in Wales that was visited by the 7th Doctor and Ace. While this didn't happen on screen, it did happen in the expanded universe in the prose story Cat's Cradle in 1992. That story involved a stone circle that allowed people to travel into another dimension, so you can kind of see where the parallels between that and 73 Yards cross over. Number 10 sees the return of Mrs. Flood. Now, we haven't seen her at all since the last thing she said was, "You've never seen a TARDIS before." We'd like some answers to that, Mrs. Flood, but we're not going to get them in this episode, so we reckon that this is a long setup for what will be probably delivered in Season 2. Still, nice to see you again, Anita Dobson. Nice to see you. Speaking of returns, number 9 sees the return of Kate Lethbridge Stewart. Delighted to see her again because she's just kind of awesome. I love that this sets up and sort of expands upon what we've seen before. We saw with Mel and Donna that effectively Unit is there to be like, "Oh, do you want a job after?" And she effectively says as much to Ruby. And this section also discusses the perception filter that surrounds the TARDIS, as we know, seems to surround the woman that has been following Ruby. And we've seen so many perception filters across the franchise. The keys to the TARDIS have perception filters as well. We saw this back in Last of the Time Lords, Sound of Drums, and of course Prisoner Zero used a perception filter when hiding from Amy in her house. Number 8, and we're sticking with Kate here, is that she says mankind saw a sunrise and invented God. Or at least the arrival of a Sontaran. Sontarans are, of course, Doctor Who's very own little potato-headed aliens that were first introduced in the 3rd Doctor serial, The Time Warrior, and we last saw them in Season 13 in 2021. Also, I love how Ruby just chuckles, haha, yeah, of course. Do you know much about Sontarans, Ruby, do you? Have we missed a whole bunch of adventures so far? We may have, wibbly wobbly. Number 7, it's both frustrating and funny, and it all relates to a QR code on the table that Kate and Ruby are sitting at. The first thing that's frustrating about this is that the QR code is incomplete. A lot of people, and quite frankly, possibly myself as well, would have gone, alright then, that doesn't work, let's move on to the next one. However, this is the era of the internet, and quite frankly, Danny had some spare time. If you do manage to complete the QR code and scan it, it brings you to stephenfielding.co.uk. Stephen Fielding has been a graphic designer for Doctor Who for a few years now, so fair play, he's obviously added the QR code as a little bit of cheeky self-promotion. No one to blame you. You can check out my 2 books, which are available on amazon.co.uk or amazon.com. Just check out Sean Ferrick and it'll bring you straight to it. Let's see if this makes the edit. Someone at the BBC may have had a little bit of a, haha, that was funny, to Mr. Fielding, because now you'll see the QR code redirects directly to the Doctor Who website. Number 6, and we're going to talk about Roger ap Gwilliam and the Albion Party. Albion is an alternate name for Great Britain, and it's ancient. It's really not used anymore. The phrase Perfidious Albion, which means England cannot be trusted, is something that's been used over the centuries as well. I'm not putting a judgment on that, I'm just telling you what it means. Now, what we do know is Russell T Davies's well-known stance on conservatives and conservative governments, so this is hardly accidental. Bigger, better, bolder Britain feels like a pretty obvious nod to another well-known slogan in politics over the last few years as well. Number 5, and we're going to continue with Albion for its in-universe connections too. Albion Hospital appeared in Series 1, no, not this Series 1, and no, not the Hartnell Series 1, but the Series 1 that was in 2005, which was of course also showrun by Russell T Davies. It appeared in the episodes Aliens of London, but also The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. In the latter story, it was the hospital that Dr. Constantine worked at. Furthermore, the logo for ap Gwilliam's Albion Party bears a striking resemblance to Harold Saxon's party logo from season 3. It's unclear yet what the connection, if any, between these two is, but in theory it could simply be the same political party, just separated by time. After all, Harold Saxon was in power in 2008, whereas Roger ap Gwilliam was in power in the 2040s. Number 4, we're sticking with Albion again. We're on a bit of a roll here. We're going to talk about Ruby's appearance at Albion HQ. Here, when Ruby walks in, we can see a list of corporate sponsors on the far right of the screen. One of those sponsors is AMNN. AMNN is a fictional American news broadcasting company that was famously hosted by Trinity Wells during Russell T Davies' first run as showrunner. As revealed in The Giggle, Trinity has left AMNN and she's gone on to strike out on her own. So, by the 2040s, Albion and AMNN are in bed together, showing that as soon as Trinity leaves, it all goes to pot. Number 3, Roger ap Gwilliam is being interviewed as part of this election cycle. Now, the interviewer is named Amal Rajan. Now, he is played by Amal Rajan. We can only imagine that this role might not have been too difficult for him to play, because in real life he is also an interviewer and broadcaster, and at the moment is probably best known as the host of University Challenge. During Russell T Davies' first era, he was known to cast real-life celebrities as themselves. Think of Paul O'Grady in The Stolen Earth and Andrew Marr in Aliens of London and World War III. So we reckon there's going to be a lot more faces popping up like this throughout this run of the show. Number 2, and as Ruby makes her way over to Marty Bridges for the Albion celebration party, you can just spot 2 blurry images there in the background. These are assistant graphic designer Sophie Cowdery and set decorating assistant Lois Rage. I'm going to be full disclosure, if I had the chance to pop myself into an episode of Doctor Who, I'm doing it, and I do not feel one bit of guilt about it, so fair play to both of them. Number 1 is actually a really cool production detail that would have been pretty easy to miss. As you see Ruby jumping forward in time, 20s, 30s, and then into her 40s, you can see the city outside of her apartment begins to reflect those changes in time as well. At one point, we can see futuristic car chargers on the street, and when we get as far as her 40s, there's drones and holograms in the sky as well. It's that kind of attention to detail that really kind of makes the difference. You can pop somebody in old age makeup and say time has passed by, or what you can do is do that and add to the rest of the scene as well to show that time has passed by. What did you spot that we didn't spot? Pop it into the comments below, and then let's just keep the conversation going. Let's keep our wild speculation going. Who is Susan Twist? Will we see Roger ap Gwilliam again? What did that guy do that Ruby said, oh, that was all his fault? Because, I think there's a spin-off that could happen there. You're awesome, you're brilliant. We will see you again. We've got lots of stuff coming up. We've got a discussion video for this episode coming up. We've got our ups and downs for the next episode as well. We are going to be inundating you. I would say I'm sorry, but I'm having too much fun. Thanks very much, folks. Keep things wibbly wobbly, and I'll see you soon.